Well, good morning. I come to you, unfortunately, with a bit of a cold, which is the joy of having grandchildren. Every visit, I think we come away with some new strain of either tummy bug or flu, and even now it seems, even down the telephone as well. So there we are. So most of you, a lot of you here know who I am, and I'm probably going to describe some things, and people are going to go on and say, well, it probably didn't happen that way. It's not how I remembered. But anyway, Dan Forshaw, lived around here for about 35 years, married to Beverly. She is a nursing sister at the RVI, deals with neonatal intensive care. 2 daughters, both down in Wakefield. They're both teachers. And we have 2 grandchildren. So that's sort of the first lay of the land. So how did it all begin? I think it's probably fair to say that I was born a Christian. Now, the theologians among you probably raise your eyebrows and say, oh, I'm not quite sure that's how I remember it. But I was born in Croydon, which is where the family was from, to a Christian family. And when I say Christian family, I mean Christian parents who went to church. My mother's parents were Christians, they went to church. My father's parents were Christians, they went to church. All the family, cousins, aunties, uncles, everybody went to church. And this was known as the Exclusive Brethren. I don't know whether anybody's heard of them. They were a particularly restrictive denomination. And so really I didn't know anybody outside the church when I was growing up, certainly for the first 5 or 6 years. And in fact I would say that I didn't really know any non-Christians until I went to school. And certainly didn't have any non-Christian friends. So it was really quite a tight upbringing in the Brethren Church. And the worst thing about it was 5 Sunday services. So we had 6 o'clock in the morning, we had 9 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, afternoon reading, and then gospel service. And I don't remember whether I was ever taken to all of them on all occasions, but I do remember getting up about 5:30 in the morning, and it's the excitement of being able to brush my teeth in the kitchen sink, because my dad and I were going to set the boilers away in the meeting room at 5:30 to get it warmed up for people coming for 6. So that was kind of the early life. When I was about 7, we moved north. My father was an engineer and was involved with the CME. And I think, if I'm right in saying, when we moved north, he was working on the metro in Newcastle. So we moved to Morpeth, in fact, and lived there for a number of years. We eventually ended up at Regent's Chapel, if anybody knows it, in Gosforth. Open Brethren, well, that was great, because that meant only 2 services on a Sunday. the women didn't have to wear hats, and mums and dads could have sherry before their Sunday lunch. So that was an improvement on the Exclusive Brethren. So that was at Regent's Chapel. When I said I was born a Christian, I think the reason I said that is because I always believed what I was taught. I was taught by Christian parents and Christian family. So I can never think of a time when I didn't believe either in God of the Bible, Jesus Christ as his Son and my Saviour. Always believed that. So in a sense, I consider myself a Christian. And we were always encouraged as little kids to, when we went to bed, to read the Bible and to say a prayer and to ask Jesus into your heart, which is what I did for probably 5 or 6 years, every night. Belt and braces, make sure you're in the kingdom. But of course, as time went on, having sat under many sermons about you're not going to get into heaven on a family ticket, I sort of started to realise I had to make a personal commitment myself, which meant that I then took on the responsibility of being a Christian in the big, bad, horrible world. So at this point, we were living, we'd moved from Morpeth, actually, sort of nearer to Long Horsley. We were out in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know whether you remember, but sort of very late 70s into the very early 80s, we had some really bad winters. And so much so that we used to get snowed in quite regularly. In fact, we used to have the RAF used to fly over in the helicopters and even drop bales of hay for farmers, or people used to write in the snow if they needed help or anything like that. And some of the snowdrifts could be 6, 8, 10 feet tall, but they were in the lanes where they'd come over the hedges and dropped into the lanes. And we couldn't go anywhere sometimes for 4 or 5 days. And in fact, one year I remember walking from where we lived to catch a bus on the 697 into Morpeth to get shopping, to get the bus back, and then the mile trudge. Not through the lanes, through the fields, because you couldn't walk in the lanes. Anyway, one day we were out with the dog. We had this black Labrador. And my father and I had gone for a walk in the snow, and of course we were walking through the fields. And we were about probably 2 or 3 fields away from home. And I can remember every time we came to a corner of a field, a gate which wouldn't open obviously with the snow or a fence, my father used to bend down and he would pick up this Labrador, which I couldn't pick up. I was probably my early teens, and dump it over the fence. And then we'd climb over and go on to the next one. And it was starting to get dark, and I thought, we're not going to get home before it gets dark. The second thought was, what happens if Christ comes? I was behind him at the time, walking in the snow. What happens if Christ comes? He'll go, will I? Or I'll be stuck here in the snow. I'm never going to lift that Labrador over that fence. So I literally, there and then, made a commitment of faith, a permanent, what I would call becoming a proper Christian. Realising I wasn't going to get into heaven on my family ticket, and I needed to do it myself. And I did that. Anyway, after that, of course, I was plagued with this verse in the New Testament where Paul talks about believe and be baptised. Oh, done the first bit. Now I've got to be baptised. Well, that means going and asking the elders at the church and all that. So I put it off and put it off and put it off. But of course, the Spirit puts pressure on you, doesn't he? And he puts weight on you over a period of time. So anyway, months, I can't remember how long later it was, but I was sat in the morning service at Regent Chapel, and I was thinking this: you've got to be baptised, you've got to be baptised, you've got to be baptised. Tell you what, people don't get baptised very often here. I'll do it the next time somebody gets baptised. That's what I'll do. So the next time somebody gets baptised, I'll jump on the bandwagon, 2 for 1. Job's a good one. Just as I'm 3 to 1 back into the room, the brother who was standing up giving the notices delightfully said, I'm very pleased to say, next week X is asked to be baptised. Thanks, Lord. You didn't give much warning there, did you? So the following week, I was baptised. And at Regent's Chapel. And I always remember my grandfather, who used to go to the Brethren meeting in Alnwick, he came along and he gave me a present, which I still have, which is the concise dictionary of theological words. It isn't very concise, it's quite heavy, it's quite big, but it holds a lot of dust on my shelf. Ironically, my parents gave me a towel. So you can see the difference. It was a gold towel. I'm not quite sure whether that has any sort of theological significance. So I had a Bible dictionary and a gold towel. So by this point, I was leaving school. I went to school in Morpeth. My first job was in Phoenix. And I joined Phoenix as a management trainee, along with some other guys and girls. I never really got any further than management trainee. It wasn't really the job for me. And also I'd met Beverly. She'd been working in Phoenix and we were engaged to be married. And I was paid incredibly poorly by Phoenix, I must say. Not really enough to get married on. And one of the guys I worked with, joined Phoenix with, he left and joined Northumbria Police. And he came in one day, I think I was on the cycle section up the top. And he says, honestly, they pay you so well. It's really good, join the police. And that actually was Winton Keenan, who then became the Chief Constable of Northumbria Police. So I did join, and in 1987, and came here to Hexham, much to Beverly's disgust. We were living in Gosforth at the time. Where's Hexham? And so anyway, there I was, into Hexham. We were living in Gosforth at the time. So I served 30 years, as they say, man and boy, with Northumbria Police. I did a few years here at Hexham as a uniform. My whole service was in uniform, by the way. I was never CID or anything like that. I was always a PC, never a sergeant. I was acting sergeant once, I think, for one day, and then they decided that it wasn't for me. I was caught with my feet on the desk, I think, by the inspector. Anyway, so I did a few years at Crudup, then I went to Newcastle City Centre, the old Pilgrim Street, if you remember. That was a tough place to work, that really was. That was a hard man's policing. And if you were a policeman in those days, it was a hard life for you too. Whilst I was at Pilgrim Street, I trained as a firearms officer, and I was a firearms officer with Northumbria Police for a few years. In those days, you didn't work, now it's a department, you would join the department, and in those days you didn't, it was over and above your duties as a police on shift. And we would carry a pager, and you would be on call for, say, two weeks out of 4, and whether you're on duty or off duty, the pager would go and you would have to go somewhere with your kit, always carried your kit. And then I did some additional training in personal protection as well, for royalties and things like that. So I did that for a few years. While I was still doing that, I left Newcastle and went on to motor patrols, where I was stationed here at Hexham, on traffic for a few years, up and down the A69, persecuting the motorist. That actually was probably one of the best jobs in the force. I don't think it is now, but it certainly was then. We had the run of the whole of the area command, and Northumberland was the second largest in England and Wales, outside of one, I think, in North Wales, and we were about 850 square miles, something like that. So that's from the Scottish borders to the Durham border, and from roughly Pontyland A697, A68 across to Cumbria. That was all of our area. So that's that. When I had about 3 years service, we moved to Hexham. I was still working here then, and we joined the Methodist Church. We decided, actually, when we came to Hexham, that we would join the local church, and it was West End, because we were on Alexander Terrace. And I think, my time in the Methodist Church, I can say hand on heart, was probably some of the best years. Lovely people, great welcome. And because I worked around here such a lot, I got a lot of support through the Methodist Church. Of course, when you join a church, the first thing they look at you and they say, Sunday school teacher. Come here. And so I was drawn into some work in the Sunday school initially, and then some work in the youth work. I was working with a guy called Ken Mathieson. I don't know whether anybody remembers Ken. Sadly passed away a few years ago. And we sort of came to the decision that perhaps we should try and get the Methodist Church to do some training with us. That didn't really work out, because obviously Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, they're largely untrained, aren't they? But it started a thought in me about training for the ministry. And we moved across to Trinity because the girls were growing up, and there was a good youth scene there. And I started local preaching, did a bit of local preaching under David Perkins, but it didn't work out for a number of reasons, which I won't go into in detail. But when that happened, I felt very much a calling to go outside of the Methodist Church to train. And I decided to go to Bible school, looked at a few, and one I hadn't looked at, which turned out to be the one obviously the Lord wanted me to go to, was the Evangelical Theological College of Wales, which has changed its name, I think, about 3 times since then. Then became West, and then I can't remember what it is now. And that's in Bridgend in Wales. So about 2003, I think, I started, I went part-time at work, and I started studying theology down in Bryntyrion in Wales. After a year, I went back full-time with the police, still having this idea that I was going to perhaps finish this and go into full-time ministry. That, as you can see, has never worked out. I was convinced that's where I was going to end up, but clearly the Lord had different ideas. But it took quite a while for him to get that through to me. I finished at Bryntyrion. I didn't quite finish my degree, but I came out with an HND. So my plan was always to go to Oak Hill in North London. That was my desire, to go to Oak Hill and do my last year. But again, that never worked out. And the thing that has really struck me is, when I look back, is that the Lord has always had me where he wanted me. Not where I thought I should be, but where he wanted me. And my father, when I used to say to him, I used to ring him up and he'd say, "What are you doing?" I would say, "I think I'm going to go into the ministry." "What, really? Leave the police?" Because to him I was in a secure job. My grandmother, I remember we had a family dinner one day, and we were sat at a big table with about 20 of us of the family there, and my father turned to my grandmother and he said, "Are you proud that your son's doing theology?" And she says, "Not at all." She says, "But I'm very proud of the fact he's a policeman." And so these were kind of hints that I was being told that, no, I've got you where I want you. So being a Christian and a policeman. That's quite difficult, I would say. When I joined Northumbria Police, what I found out very quickly is that there's very few Christians in the police. I will say there's more now, I think. I'm pretty sure there's more now. At that time, there was very few. And the ones that were there tended to be in office jobs, or they tended not to be on the front line. And I do understand that to a degree. I did meet the odd one or two, and also the people who dealt with the clientele that we dealt with as police officers, by and large, were churchgoers. Of course, Christians can be victims of crime, so I did come across the odd person here or there. But by and large, it was a very isolating experience when it comes to being a Christian. And this is why I said earlier, the Methodist Church in Hexham I found almost like a comfort blanket. They were fantastic with me. I was going to give a few examples, but I just wanted to give, I don't know about your Christian life, but certainly with me, I always have a verse buzzing about my head. Usually that's relevant to what I'm doing. And there's three verses that, when I've been thinking about this, a couple of them have been in my head for years. And I'll give them to you. So, and this relates to me in my Christian life. So the first one is 1 Kings 19:18. Anybody know what it is? Of course not. It's the story of Elijah. And he's had a bonfire party with the prophets of Baal, if you remember, on Mount Carmel. And he won. And not only did it burn his bonfire, but it burned pretty much everything else around it, even though it was soaked in water. But at the end of that, he ran, actually faster than the chariots, if you remember. He flew, didn't he? That was amazing. But he then complained to God, and he says, they've killed all the prophets. He says, I'm the only one that's left. Now they're going to try and kill me. Jezebel put out a warrant to kill him, didn't she? Now they're going to kill me. And what did God say? He said, yet I preserve 7,000 others in Israel who have never bowed down to Baal and kissed him. And that to me was just like, there's other Christians out there somewhere. And that was shown to be true. The second verse, which is Philippians 2:12, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Well, I had to actually work out what that meant first. And I don't entirely think I have worked it out. But it's one of those things you look back and you go, do you know what? It's submitting to God, isn't it? And trying to do the right thing, rather than trying to plan every detail of how your Christian life's going to work out. That's the danger. And the last one, which is Psalm 37:5-7, commit everything to the Lord. Trust him and he will help you. Be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. That's where I struggled. I'm not a patient person. Certainly not myself, even if I am with other people. So when I joined the police, going back to this thing about the 7,000, we used to go to Spring Harvest. I don't know whether else has been to Spring Harvest, but we went a good few years on the trot. One of those years, the subject was law and order, ironically. And there was a call went out for all Christian police officers to meet. And out of the, 5,000 people there, maybe more, I think it was probably about 20 of us who gathered. And most of them were from the Met. And it became very clear, sitting in that group, that there was young police officers there who were really struggling on shift. And there was one particular guy who I was dealing with and trying to help, trying to advise, who had about 5 years service in the Met and could not get involved with his shift. The culture, the shift culture he didn't like, the blaspheming, the rib tickling or bullying or whatever it was, and was on the verge of leaving. Another point to make clear, I was invited to dinner to a family whose son was joining the police, and he was a Christian. Same thing, chatted with him. I think he lasted maybe 3 to 4 months, and he left too. There was another guy who you may have heard of, the CPA, which is a Christian Police Association. They had a conference up here many years ago, in Sunderland in fact it was, and I met a guy from Northumbria Police who was a Christian, and he was a control room operator. He'd been a frontline cop, and he was struggling. And he used to ring me. I mean, in those days we didn't have mobile phones, it was pre-mobile phone days, but he would ring me, call me on the radio and say, what number are you on? Can I give you a ring? And he would come and he would speak to me, and he was having some difficult time with mental health and things like this. And what I don't understand is, how did I manage? Why did I manage? And I'm not going to say it's because my faith is stronger than anybody else's. It may be just the character of who I am. But people used to take the bung out of me, but they never bothered me. And in fact, there is actually, if you are persecuted as a Christian, and really we're not persecuted as Christians when you look around the world and see what goes on, but whatever little bullying we might get, or being ostracised, or rib tickling, actually, when you think about it, it's a pleasure because you're doing it for Christ. And you're doing it for all the right reasons. And I always had that in the back of my mind. And I was put in some embarrassing situations. There was one time when I was working at a city centre, and I didn't know that my inspector knew I was a Christian, but these things get round. And we were sat at the parade table, and there was probably at the parade table almost as many people as there are here now. Inspector, 3 patrol sergeants, and probably 25 PCs. And it was Easter Sunday. And do you remember those, was it the Walk of Faith, or they used to walk from the top of Newcastle down to the cathedral possibly, I think, and somebody used to carry a cross. And the inspector said, I need a PC to keep an eye on the walk. And he says, Danny, you can do it. He says, you can go and help your mate Jesus carry his cross. Now that is, in a sense I had to laugh at it. Yeah. But amongst 25 of your colleagues, it can be a bit embarrassing. I'm on another page now. I'm way ahead of myself. Another time, the way the police computer systems worked was you had a warrant card that went into the computer, and that gave you access to everything you were doing. Took it out, it was all secure. And you were always warned, never leave your card in, because somebody will send an email or somebody will do something. And I've done it. I did it. My thing was, if somebody left a card in, change their password. And I stopped doing it. Well, there was once I got reported to the superintendent, and the superintendent said to the person who was complaining about me changing the password, why did you leave your card in the machine? And she said, I didn't. He said, well, clearly you did. But the one that stopped me doing it was a guy who decided he was going to go to the loo. So I thought, there's a chance to change his password. So I changed his password, and that was it. Anyway, it was late at night. I think I was working at Bellingham at the time. And so he was in the loo, and I shouted, I've changed the password, it's this. And he'd go, what? And I don't think he heard me. Anyway, I went home, and that was it. Anyway, at about 4:15 in the morning, the phone rang, and it was this guy saying, what's my password? I need my password. So I didn't do it after that, because it meant I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, but anyway, so you see the thing, what happened was, so anyway, in this case, the sergeant had left his card in the machine, apparently. So anyway, I came to work, and I got this email, and it said, Dear Dan, he said, I'm envious of the fact that you're a Christian. I admire you. I would really like to come to church with you and hear more about what it is to be a Christian. Really well written, this email. Can I come to your church on Sunday? He said, can we arrange to meet somewhere near the church, and then I can come in with you? He said, but please don't tell anybody else. So I was delighted. I'm thinking, your witness is getting somewhere here. So I was out in the car with this cop, and he asked a question. And it was a very subtle question, but I knew straight away that he'd written that email. And the sergeant had left his card in the machine, and he'd sat down and wrote this email to me, to kid me, to stand on the corner and wait for the sergeant to turn up outside church. So the sergeant didn't want to become a Christian after all. But I did have opportunities to witness. It was generally on a one-to-one basis in a car when you've been on night shift for 8 hours and there's nothing happening, which as the years went on became less and less. And it was usually instigated by the people sat next to me. And invariably they were having a difficult time at home or a difficult time at work, and they would just start a conversation. And usually it was, does Christianity, how does it make a difference to your life? That was usually the starter. What does it mean? What does Christian mean? When I was doing local preaching, and people used to say to me, Danny's going to be a vicar. Danny's going to be a vicar. Oh, you're going to be a vicar? What religion are you? Christian. What's that? Methodist. Oh, yes. Yeah, I get that. Because they got that, because there's a lot of Methodism around here. Their grandfather might have been a Methodist preacher, or Granny went to the Methodist Church. So it was common language. It worked really well. So that was that. So meeting people outside of work who were Christians, that happens now and again. But as I say, it didn't happen very often. But the fact that I felt sort of fairly isolated, every now and again the Lord would feed you a bit of encouragement. And I don't know whether, a lot of you here know John and Dorothy Green. So just when I was a young cop, it was a Sunday morning, and there was a ding-dong at the front counter, and there was a couple stood there, and this lady had had her handbag stolen. And so, right, okay, so I took all the details. Can you tell me what was in your handbag? You know, usual things, lipstick, powder, purse, blah, blah, blah. Bible. I said, oh, Bible. I said, okay. I said, was it NIV or UT James? And this lady looked up and she went, do you? I said, I do. And that was it. That was literally, that was the conversation. And away she went. So, a couple of years later, when we moved to Hexham, sort of going back in time, and we joined the Methodist Church, this lady came up to me and she said, you're that policeman, aren't you? That was Dorothy. She said, I knew you were a Christian. I said, I knew you were a Christian too. And this, in a sense, was the joy of being a Christian. Actually, when you come across a Christian, there's a bit of you knows that the other one is a Christian too. Because I came across a lot of people, and I don't want to pick on the Catholic faith at all, but a lot of people were Catholics because they were brought up as Catholics, and they saw Catholic as their religion. Or maybe Church of England, or whatever it is, because they thought you maybe on a family ticket, I don't know. But when you actually came across a true brother or sister in Christ, it was you knew, you just had that feeling. And that happened with Dorothy and John. And the second one was I'm giving you 3 examples here. There were others, but this is, I'm going to give you 3. There was a lady, I had a call to go to this, to see this little old lady, and who had been tricked by a bogus caller. So I got to the house, and I went, and I knocked on the door, and she let me in, and I went in, and she was a lovely lady, and she turned around straight away and disappeared into the kitchen. So I followed her. She was making scones. I'm thinking, this person's just been tricked by a bogus caller, and she's making scones. That doesn't seem right somehow. She doesn't seem to be upset or concerned. So she told me the story, and she'd been making these scones, and she was in the kitchen, and she turned around, and there's a man stood behind her. And he said, I'm here to check your water. And so he went and he turned the tap on, and he checked the water, and he said a few more things to her, and he kept her busy for a few minutes, and then he left. And she wasn't really too concerned, and she wandered around the house and found the back window open, and obviously him or his mate had been through the living room, bedrooms, drawers, and taken a quantity of cash, I think, if I remember rightly, and jewellery and things like this. And this lady, she was just not concerned. Well, I'm not saying she wasn't concerned, but she just wasn't troubled by what had happened to her. And I said, look, I need to sit down and take a statement from you. She said, I can't. She said, I'm making these scones for my sister-in-law who's blind. And she said, there's a fish and chip van coming, and I need to get the fish and chip van to get the fish and chips for our tea. Okay, well, I'll come back tomorrow. And there was something about this lady, this sort of confidence, this lack of worry. And I thought, I wonder whether she's a Christian. Again, that was that. Anyway, probably 6 months later, how are we doing for time, by the way? I'm about a third of the way through. Is that a third of the way through? 10 minutes. Okay. Sorry, I'm going on. Sorry. So anyway, the Methodists used to have these meetings every so often in a Sunday evening, where all the churches gathered together and we used to sing hymns. And this one was at Trinity, and all the buses had come. There was a bus on from Holtwhistle, Richard, you all remember. Bus on from Holtwhistle, bus on from Prudder, bus on from Prudder. And Trinity, which holds about 300 on this day, was full. And we were singing, it was like songs of praise. We were singing hymns from the top of our voices. But the hymns were chosen by members of the congregation, or the congregations. Anyway, this little old lady stood up and gave a bit of a testimony at the front. And I was on the door, and I couldn't quite hear what she was saying, but it was basically that the Lord had cared for and protected her over the years. And it was this lady. And I was allowed to, I was in tears. But what it was that got me was the fact that God had sent another Christian to her. She didn't know it, I didn't know it, but in his wisdom and his mercy and his grace, he had sent somebody else to her. And the reason it hadn't bothered her was, had been robbed, as it were, was because she was secure in Christ. And that was where she had her life. And I think I'm right in saying 2 guys were caught for that some weeks later on, which is obviously good. The last example, which was based in Petty France in London, I don't know if anybody knows it. During the 2011 London riots, one of the things I did when I gave up firearms was to become a PSU officer, which is basically a riot cop. And I was a medic. I was trained as a medic. And what a medic does is, when you have a riot, we go in and we stabilise casualties and evacuate them to the ambulance, because the ambulance service can't go into the danger areas. So that's what we used to do. So we were down there during the London riots, and we'd been asked all to convene in Petty France. And I was actually I took some photographs, and I was looking at them last night. And as I drove into Petty France, it's a one-way street, quite narrow, and there was police vans all the way down. There must have been 20, 30 police vans all the way down, and we had to drive right to the end. So there'd be 9 vans of our vans, 3 in a serial, so we were sort of in a group of 3, and we all parked at the far end. Anyway, we got out, and we sort of, you mill about and have a smoke or whatever, if you're a smoker. But then they gave the order to go into what's called dress code 2, which is full riot gear minus your helmet and your shields. Now, you can't get dressed in the van, and you need a buddy to dress you up. So it's underneath is fireproof underwear. You've got your plates, so you've got plates for your shoulders, your knees, your thighs, all sorts of things, and then you've got a fireproof suit that goes over the top, and then you have a neck over, which comes over your head if you're putting your helmet on. Anyway, you have to strip your underwear to do this, and you can't do it in a van. And so when we pulled up, there was 2 ladies sat in a cafe right next to where we were, and they never looked at us, and they were sat right in the window here, and we were just here, and they were sat, I don't know, having a coffee or whatever. It was an Italian cafe. And of course, all of a sudden, we're out the van, and we're all getting undressed in the street. And, down to around, getting dressed and all this sort of thing. Anyway, suddenly, the door of the cafe opened, and one of the ladies came out. And I thought, we're in trouble here, bare legs, underpants and all this sort of thing. We're all in various sort of states of dress. And she said, I'm so thankful for you guys being here in London, coming to support us. And she said, I want God to be with you, to protect you and bless you. Can I pray for you all? And I'm not kidding. Silence. She stood on that street and prayed, probably a 2-minute prayer for us on that street. And to me, that was such a God encouragement, Sorry, there is more to say. I'll try and be very quick. There's something I did want to say. When Klaus suggested I should come and do this, the first thing I wrote on my note paper, and this is one of the saddest things I found being a police officer, was suicides. And until you've done somebody's job, you don't know what that job is. And we all watch a lot of TV, and it's not like the TV programs you watch. Basically, we work on our own. Usually one man, one job, as a rule. Not entirely, but as a general, especially when you're rural, like I was for all the time. When I worked in the city centre and I worked Newcastle West End, I don't think I came across a suicide once. Out here, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens I've done over the years. And the thing that used to concern me the most, worry me the most, sadden me the most, was old people. I mean, those young people killed themselves. The statistics will tell you that it's men between 49 and 53, I think, who were the highest group. But out here, it was a lot of older people who had absolutely no hope in life and nothing to live for, and that used to sadden me so much. One particular one was an old lady. She tried several times to kill herself. We as local cops knew who she was. And one morning we got a telephone call to say the curtains are closed, we think you better go around and knock the door in, which we did. And went in, it was myself actually, I think my sergeant had come with me on that particular day. And this lady had just finally done it and finally killed herself. And on the mat behind the door was an A4 envelope. And it was clearly from the consultant who was looking after psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever it was, I don't know. And I opened the envelope and I read it. And it said in this letter that this lady was feeling much better, she was much improved, and she was being discharged back to her GP. And that was the day before. And do you know why she was happier? Because all the problems in her life were about to end, because she was going to kill herself, because she believed that was the end. And that she didn't have to worry about finances, loneliness, ill health, anything, because she was going to end it all. And yet it's not the end, we don't believe it's the end, do we? And there is a hope. Another guy we did manage to save, who came to the end of his tether, was building an extension on his house, decided that he would end it all, and hung himself from the loft hatch of the new extension. Fortunately, he did it with 30 amp cable, which doesn't bend very easily, and it didn't tighten on his neck. And although he was unconscious when he got there, we were able to shoulder him back into the loft and bring him round. And he ended up in hospital. He didn't come round for about 10 minutes with the paramedics there. And I said to him after, I said, what did you do that for? He said, well, I've got nothing to live for. I said, there's just nothing left. And it's just so sad. There was a couple of others that I would mention, but I'm going to finish because I'm way over my time. I just want to give you one example of God's care and protection. Back in 2005, if you remember, we had some very bad floods around here, and I was on duty in Hayden Bridge, and the Tyne had burst its banks, the main river, and it was coming across into Inner Hoff Mews in Hayden Bridge, the low-lying areas and all that. And we'd been sandbagging houses, and we'd been helping people carry filing cabinets upstairs. And the rain was absolutely torrential. When you were driving, you couldn't tell what was flood and what was road. It was that bad. So I got a call to go to Newborough. I was driving a Nissan Terrano. They don't make it anymore. But they stand about 6 feet high and probably have about 2.5 feet of clearance at ground level. And I was driving to Hayden Bridge, and to 4 stones from Hayden Bridge, and I turned over the railway line, and I was going parallel with the railway line on the B6319, I think it is. It's the road that runs from Hayden Bridge through to Allawash. And I thought, this water's getting quite deep, and it was right next to where the old fire station used to be and the allotments. And as I was driving on through there, the water's getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and I thought, ooh, this is getting quite deep. And I know I can get through about 3 foot of water with a nice bow wave. I've done it several times that day. Anyway, I stopped the car, opened the door, and the water was the same level as the sill. So I thought, I think I'm okay here. So anyway, I proceeded, and anyway, the water got very deep very quickly, and it went dark all of a sudden. And the car conked out, pitch dark, nothing, absolutely pitch dark. And I could feel, all of a sudden, the car started to move sideways. I thought, oh, I could be in trouble here. So anyway, obviously it wouldn't restart. So I thought, well, I better get out. So I tried the electric windows, nothing. So I thought, oh, this is getting tasty. I know I've got a crowbar in the back. I'll climb over the back, get the crowbar and smash the window and get out. Anyway, then I twigged I'd turned the ignition off. So I turned the ignition back on and the window opened. So I climbed out and I was standing on the edge of the window, and I had my radio in one hand and I had a torch, and I was hanging onto the roof rail. And I'm doing this with this dragon light, and all I could see was water for as far as the eye could see. All the allotments were completely covered. Anyway, by this time, the car had completely turned its Terrano. I mean, I don't know how much they weigh, 2.5 tons maybe. Turned itself round completely. It was floating, but you could hear the water coming in. And it was because the engine was heavier. It was going backwards down the road with the wind. I couldn't see any of the hedges. All the hedges were covered. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. So now I thought, I've got to get off this boat. So eventually, it came to a stop at the bottom of where the New Alston Road is. And I think it's hit a raised verge. And I went backwards into this verge, and it stopped. And I thought, right, here's the time to get off. So I climbed over the roof of the car, sat on the spare wheel on the back door, thought, I think it was January, this is going to be cold. So away I went down into the water, and the water was up to here. And I'm like this, torch, radio, and I thought, if I have to swim, I'm in trouble. So I did this. Oh, it was too deep. I did that. Anyway, eventually, after about, I would say 25, 30 minutes, I managed to find a way out where I didn't have to swim and I could just keep myself in this depth of water. Scrambled out up a bank into a farmyard, and then the local butcher who was going to check his butcher's shop gave me a lift round to the RVP point, which was at the school. That's fine. So anyway, off work for a few days, and after just days off, came back to work, and by this time the car had been recovered. It had taken a few days for the water to go down. Before I'd left, actually, the traffic department who were running me home shone their lights down, all the way down that road, and you could just see the bar lights sticking above the water. So it was a good 5.5 to 6 foot deep. And so anyway, so the car was obviously written off, and so the next day I phoned Nissan, and I said, look, can I speak to somebody in the technical department? I said, yes, put me through. I said, look, if a car goes into water with 4 electric windows, how long have you got to get out? They went, oh, we don't really know. Tell you what, Northumbria Police have just drowned a car. Give them a ring, they might tell you. I said, I'm Northumbria Police. And they went, oh, well, you better ask the lad that drowned it. I said, I'm the lad that drowned it. I said, so in the end I was telling them about 10 seconds. I said, what, you've got the door, that's all you've got. So anyway, at the end of the week, the car was recovered. All the stuff from the car was brought and dumped into the garage at Coventry Station. This big pile of cones, equipment, all soaking wet, filthy, dirty water, sewage in it, my coat, my briefcase, everything all there. And it was all had to go in the bin. And I unzipped my case and went through it. And I used to carry a New Testament with me on duty. I don't have it now. I gave it away to a guy whose daughter didn't have a Bible. But it was just a little NLT, soft cover red Bible in my briefcase, in an outside pocket. Everything went in the bin. Outside pocket, Bible, completely dry, completely unharmed, not a drop of water. Everything else completely wet. Now, I don't know how it happened. I don't know whether there was enough room for it, the briefcase to float. I don't know. But that was the only thing that came out of there, completely unscathed. One thing, that New Testament Bible. And I thank the Lord for that. There is more to say, but I can't say because I've gone on far too long. I'm now retired. I do still work for the police. I did work in custody, which is another story in itself, at Forth Banks, which is probably another 20 minutes to talk as well. But sorry to keep you so long.
No, thank you very much.